I told him it would be a brief conversation. It might be a little bit longer when I look further into this. Senator Joe Pittman is on the line with us here this morning. Conversation brought to you by Marcus & Mack, a law firm representing injured people. Senator, good morning.
Todd, good morning.
Good to have you with us here today. There is a news conference being held today with leaders in the Senate, Jake Corman, Kim Ward, Kerry Benninghoff, the leader of the House Republican caucus. They're talking about Governor Wolf and some sort of an attempt to change the language on the constitutional amendment having to do with the governor's emergency declaration powers. Do you have any idea what that's all about?
Well, it appears the governor has taken his Ivy League education and apparently used some creative writing classes along the way, because what he's doing is he's using the Department of State and the Attorney General's office to manipulate the language of the constitutional amendment. And he moved forward and advertised that language, and he basically attempted to write it in a way that made it sound as if it would give the General Assembly unilateral authority in limiting executive powers during emergency declarations, and do it in a way that's arbitrary. I honestly, the governor's made no bones about his opposition to this constitutional amendment. As we've talked before, it's the one avenue that we as a legislature have that doesn't involve him. And this is his way of trying, in my opinion, to muddy the waters and get the voters to either ignore the question or to vote no. But just as he's attempting to educate the public on this, my guess is that you'll hear our leadership today indicate that, we're going to be equally engaged in educating the public on what the impact is of this constitutional amendment.
So the governor is evidently, with the backing of the Attorney General's office, actually physically changing the wording on the referendum question. He has that power?
Well, he does in a way, because the Secretary of State, when we pass constitutional amendments, and I don't have the language in front of me, we direct the amendments to be placed on the ballot. The Secretary of the Commonwealth and the Attorney General are charged with ensuring that the language of the ballot question is in conformity with what we passed. Mm-hmm. So they have, I think, used some liberties, in my opinion, on how to use the language. The problem is, if we begin to contest this, it becomes a matter of delay, and we have to get this in front of the voters so they can make a decision. And so I think, again, I'll defer to our leadership team, but I think the decision is that we're going to move forward. We're going to educate the voters on what this amendment really means and try to get them to understand that if they want a rebalance of power in how our government runs, this is a constitutional question that they should support.
It just boggles the mind that he would have that sort of power to change what the legislature has put in place. He can't stop the question from being put on, but he can change the question to make it say what he wants. That appears to be what's happening.
Well, he can't stop it. You're right, and he hasn't changed the question. He has presented the question, and again, I was perhaps a little flippant when I pointed out about creative writing course, but it's true. I mean, he has, and again, I don't have the question in front of me right now, but he presented it in a way that would allow the reader of it to interpret it in a couple different angles. And so, he is, I believe, conformed technically with his duties. He's just played a little bit of a bait and switch, in my opinion, on the language.
So when Senator Corman and Senator Ward and Representative Benninghoff talk today, you expect that they'll simply say that this is what the governor is trying to do and this is how we're going to counter it? Would that be what they're going to be talking about today?
I would guess. I certainly hate to talk about what the leadership may say before, I hear it. But in our conversations earlier this week, I got the impression that, the best course of action is to allow this to go forward and focus on educating our constituents on what the question means.
It's just amazing that the way these things are structured, that it really should not be that way. But
well, in fairness, and we've talked about this before about the language. In general, when you don't have something even that's controversial, it can be very difficult to word a ballot question when it comes to the amending of our Constitution. It's just, if you've ever read the state constitution, it's a colorful document in terms of the language and the words that are used, and conforming with that is a challenge in its own right.
Yeah, we ought to eliminate the word "whereas" forever from the English language. But
yeah, and theretofore, and
all those different archaic language structures, they ought to be done away with. Plain English ought to be something that we could all agree on. But at any rate, this news conference will be held later this morning, I think between 10:30, 11:30, sometime around there in Harrisburg.
Yes.
It'll be interesting to watch how all of that plays out this morning, because it's not something that I expected would be a part of any of these conversations. While I got you on the line, of course, the Appropriations Committee hearings began this week in the Senate. The House has a bit of a head start on the Senate appropriations hearings. What have they been like for you so far?
Well, we've actually been in session this week. We were in normal voting session this week. We're in today. The Senate State Government Committee, which I'm not a member of, will be digging into reapportionment issues, which will be first and foremost in all of our minds in this coming year. We have some challenges presented to us on that front because of the delay in the census numbers. The Census Bureau is significantly backed up, and until we get those certified numbers, it's difficult for us to move forward in that process. And so that's an area of real concern. We want to be transparent and open about it, but we also have to have these legislative lines in place by January of 2022 at the latest. So that's going to be a real challenge. But after this week of a voting session, we then will move into our budget hearings, and it'll be a good complement to what the House has done so far. I know I followed some of what Representative Struzzi's line of questioning has been, and I think it'll be a real opportunity for us to build off of each other, and how we ask questions about various issues.
Question came out yesterday from Pennsylvania News Media Association criticizing DEP for being unresponsive about its RGGI rules guidance and moving forward, not advertising properly according to state law, the various hearings and proceedings that have come out. Have you had a chance to take a look at what they wrote?
I have. In fact, I've referred to it prior on the floor a few weeks ago whenever the Environmental Committee met. There's certainly some back and forth there between the department and the News Media Association. What I find most extraordinary is that the News Media Association weighed in on the issue. And they didn't weigh in on the merits, understandably, but they weighed in on the transparency in the process. And that's highly unusual. I've not known them as an organization to weigh in like that, but I think it's very telling when you look at the magnitude of this regulation, and we've talked about it time and time again. But, we're the only state in RGGI, if we continue down this path, that has entered by executive order, other than the state of New Jersey. All the other states have entered through legislative approval. And, again, having that kind of dialogue on this issue of this magnitude is what's so important, because even going through an executive process. New Jersey has done this. I think we talked last week. They've gone in and out of Reggie based on the whim of the governor. And I don't think that's a good approach either.
No, you're right about that. Senator, you have been more than kind in joining us here this morning. I appreciate it. Have you had your breakfast yet as you head over to the Capitol?
I've just had my coffee.
There you go.
So
get something substantial there.
I have to have another cup of it now. So you got me all fired up here, ready to go. So,
Senator Joe Pittman, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Right.
See you, Todd.
It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160.